is to the far right,
Oh, yeah.
so he can see it. And I sense that, yeah, I obviously don't, you know,
And you had a
good left, right, you know, crossing on that. Yeah.
No.
So what is the siding going on that house in front of you?
They noticed.
It's apparently it's an ASAC project,
Okay, that's what I thought. It looked like decking, but vertical.
and it's like really flexible.
Weird.
It's not like the Sullivan PVC that's really rigid. This is kind of loose. And it has a, the finish is some kind of gap. It's you know,
Yeah.
different materials, like
Right.
they're doing on some of that decking.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait.
Is it kind of steel? Can steel fasteners or was it face support? Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
He said it's taking a lot.
Yeah. Sure. Interesting. It looks cool. And I thought it looked like decking.
Stacked up there, you mean?
I know I saw it on the west face of it, they were putting it up.
Yeah, I guess I see now they've got it on both floors, so I guess it's gonna be both.
Yeah.
Hi. And then.
No. Nothing. I was wondering, I sent you an email about that, wondering what's going on. Okay, I haven't heard any noise over there. Still there.
What is it?
He's got like that illegal sort of lean-to where he covered his deck. It's been up forever. He hasn't taken it down yet, so.
So I figured.
I keep looking and wondering, but it's still there.
What?
I keep looking and wondering, but it's still there.
Meeting to order, this is the Wednesday, September 20th, 2023 regular meeting, we have an amended agenda. Roll call.
Braddock, here, Buck,
Here.
Detmer, here, McSweeney,
Yeah.
Meridian, Newman,
Here.
Paul,
Here.
Robson,
Here.
Wilmot.
Here.
Right.
Second.
Rick made the motion and Ted made the second. All in favor accepting the amended agenda, aye.
Aye.
I make a motion to approve. I second. Oh.
Ted made the motion, Doug made the second, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
And finally, August 16th. Minutes, they're not finally, but. August 16 minutes, make a motion to.
I move to approve.
Right.
Second.
Charlie motions to approve, Ted seconds, all in favor. Aye.
Aye.
And the September 6th minutes.
I have one addition there.
Oh, go ahead.
It occurs to me as I was reading this, that when the gal from Eagle was speaking, the subject came up about the possibility of doing sediment borings to determine if anything was leaching off the property. And she said something to the effect of, we can't incorporate that into the work scope for either the grant or the loan, but the city can call Eagle anytime and they'll get right on it and it won't cost. I forget whether she said it would be free or of minor cost, and Eagle would be happy to do that right away. And so we made a specific point of including that as a direction to the city in the minutes, but it does not appear here. So I was going to suggest that we make an alteration, an addition to the minutes in that regard, even though I understand from Monday night that the city manager's already made that contact with Eagle to advance it, but I just thought it should be corrected in the minutes.
Okay, do you have suggested wording?
I do.
Okay, so there's some typos that I didn't catch that I'm going to correct. So if
Okay.
you could email it to me, is everybody in agreement to add that to the minutes?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, could you just read it? Yeah, we can tighten it up if you want to, but it says separate from the Eagle grant or loan. Elk, I think that's her last name, PELC. And this would go at the very end before it says at 7:41 PM, the meeting was open for public comment. That's on page 3. So I'll start again. Separate from the Eagle grant or loan, PELC recommended the city contact Eagle to request shoreline sediment testing as soon as possible along the Maple Block site, which would be provided at little or no cost. That's best I can recollect what was said.
Okay. Anything else about the minutes, Rick?
I just thought a clarification might be in order. On page 2, the 5th paragraph down that starts Wayne Seeger. And when I read the last sentence in that, I had to stop and think for a minute. He also stated that the retaining wall along the river is a grade separator. I thought, what retaining wall along the river? And then I realized, oh, it was just the retaining wall along a portion of the path along the river is what I suggest be added in there, just to clarify that it, because when I first read it, I was thinking, well, I don't remember a retaining wall along the length of the river side.
Okay, so a retaining wall along a portion of the river, and that retaining wall is a double wall. Do we want to say double retaining wall?
Along a portion of the path. Along
Yeah,
along the river. Because that way it's clear that it's
Okay.
just kind of a retaining wall for that path.
okay. So not change, just say retaining wall, not mention that it's a double wall.
Yeah, I don't think that's critical.
Okay. Anything else? I'll take a motion to approve with corrections.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Oh, well, Charlie will give it to Bethany. So Rick made the motion, Bethany seconded, all in favor of accepting it, aye.
Aye.
All right, moving on to the rental inspection program. Because this was a subcommittee of the planning commission, we actually are going to vote to pass this on to the city council. So if there's any discussion, let's have at it and then just take it to a vote to pass it on to the city council. Cease. Bethany, Rich and Matt. Okay. Do any of you have anything to say? You don't have to.
Okay. No, other than I believe, wasn't this part of the master plan? Yeah, so it's just within that framework and, yep.
Okay.
And then it was listed in here as information only. What changed as far as a vote to?
Because it was a subcommittee. So in order for it to go on to city council, you can't have like 3 members making decisions and passing it on without the full board in agreement. So,
Cynthia, I just had one question. Maybe John or the city manager or in council can certainly, it's their discussion. I was, looking at, it seemed rather benign. I'm on page, inspection section 6. No, inspection fees, section 7 is where I'm. So I'm on this top of a page. It's this several pages back. I don't think are these numbers?
was it, yes, they are.
Oh, I'm
Section
sorry.
7 is 180.
194 is kind of where I'm at, but it starts on 193. The rental inspection program provided for the rental shall be operated by the city on a break-even basis. That means the fees charged will be set at a rate to produce sufficient revenue to cover the actual direct and indirect costs of administering the program. I got the sense of this that there wasn't, the feeling I had is it wasn't meant to be like a burdensome fee thing. Yeah. I just wondered, as they discussed this, a break-even basis for rental inspection. I'm not sure. I guess I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about. Would it be? I'm just wondering how significant those fees could be.
Well, it's going to depend on a couple of things, Commissioner. One is during the committee discussions, public safety was involved because they'll be the ones that are doing the inspections. And then based on the number of units, and the idea is that certain areas of the community will be selected on a rotating basis for the inspection. And then based on the number of properties, we would take the number of properties and divide that into the cost of the inspector plus any of the direct or indirect fees. And then that would be established by council on an annual basis. I would say in other communities, the inspection fee can range anywhere from $350 to $600 a unit.
A unit.
Per unit.
Wow.
Per inspection.
Wow, that's a burden.
Well, you have to remember, these units are this is part of a business operation.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, I certainly understand you. No one wants to put specific numbers in a general document like this, and it's really council's decision.
But the philosophy was that the taxpayers should not be paying for the inspection because it is a income producing business.
A business.
The business owner should pay for the inspection. So that's why it's on a break-even basis. It would be adjusted annually.
I think the citizens with the slight pushback would be that the city has a slight monopoly on the giving of the rental inspection since it's required by our ordinance. But, I'm sure they'll be reasonable.
Sure.
That's all. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I have, Madam Chairman, if I may, I have, I guess, several questions. I wasn't part of the original strategic plan process, and so it seems to me these type of ordinance are apt to have several unintended consequences. And foremost in my mind is the impact it would have on rental rates and the supply of rental units for low, medium income housing. And I guess I wanted to really kind of understand the current need for such ordinances. Is there any background that you could provide in terms of is the city currently getting a number of complaints? Has there been any safety issues? Has anyone, any type, I know there's no one else here to really ask the questions to, but.
Well, I think, Commissioner, the rationale behind the rental inspection has to do a lot with housing quality, which we'll have a presentation on next. But many communities throughout the state of Michigan have rental inspection programs in order to ensure that the property owners that are renting the properties are doing so in a very safe and healthy way for the residents, for their tenants, but then also they're maintaining the exterior and the interior of their properties. so they don't become an economic burden on the community or the neighborhood. What we did as part of the study group was we took a look at, we don't really know the number of rental properties in the city because the city has not had a rental inspection program. But based on the current landlord registry that the city maintains, there's 399 landlords on that registry. Some of those landlords own multiple properties. Based on the American Community Survey, which is done every 5 years, they're estimating 1,078 rental units, plus or minus 212. So you could have as little as 866 or as many as 1,209. And then based on the non-homestead properties, which is information that was pulled from the assessor's records, equalization, there are 1,544 non-principal residential exemption properties. Some of those are seasonal, but some of those are going to be rental. So we're estimating that based on the data, that we could probably ascertain that the city probably has 800 rental units. And some of those are going to be in apartment complexes like you have over off of Arlington for Little Traverse Village and et cetera. But quite a few of these are going to be single family. If you take a look at the map that was attached to your packet, which is called the non-PRE map, which is they're color coded in a kind of a light teal company color, you can see the distribution of these potential properties throughout the city. And there's some areas that are heavily concentrated in some blocks, which is part of the housing quality. So
So perhaps could you, I guess I'm trying to understand. Is there a driving force behind this right now in terms of complaints that we're receiving? Have we ran into some safety issues that have concurred? And so we have maybe 800 units, maybe upward to 1,200 units. What if we pass something and all of a sudden 10% of those units are no longer in compliance and out of the supply, and we've just taken 80 to 120 units away? And so I want to make sure I don't feel like I understand the potential consequences of this recommendation, and that's what I'm trying to get at.
I can't tell you what the consequences are going to be for the city of Petoskey, but then in other communities that have rental inspection, two things happen. One, to get to your question about has the city received a lot of questions on safety complaints. That we did not talk about at the subcommittee, but from experience, a lot of tenants do not call the local unit of government to issue a safety violation or complaint because they're afraid of retribution or the possibility of not being able to lease the unit. So many times those type of complaints aren't issued or articulated to a public authority. The other part that happens is, we're going to probably find out that there's a certain small percentage of the units that can't meet the minimum threshold of the public safety guidelines that are used, which is the International Property Maintenance Code, which is kind of the minimal threshold that property should be maintained at. The question then comes in at play is what's happened in other communities. Does the landlord that owns the property willing to make the investment to bring it up to code? And in some cases, what they do is they put the house up for sale because they don't want to make the investment. And then what happens, it's either bought by somebody that does make the investment or the rental property turns into a single family owner occupied house.
So you mentioned the International Property Management Code, when I look at that, I guess I see things that are referenced under that code, and it could be things like ventilation in terms of windows and common areas, height ceilings and basements, electrical standards, grounding, and exterior treatment of houses, chip paint, these minimum standards, and I think about, I think about our community in some areas of our community that, may be more likely to have rental units. And I just wonder, I'm concerned that we have a higher risk of non-compliance implementing these standards. Do you think that's an accurate?
Initially, you may find non-compliant properties. But I think in the master plan, the concern was that the city needs to maintain a quality housing stock. And in order to provide that, you have to have certain guardrails. And one of the guardrails is a rental inspection program on the rental side. The other guardrail on the opposite side for buildings is a international property code maintenance. Or in some communities, they call it, what they call it is point of sale, which Petoskey doesn't have. Some communities require when somebody sells a home, before they can sell it, they have to have an inspection to make sure the home is up to code before it passes on to the next owner. That wasn't articulated in the master plan, but the rental inspection was. Now, I wasn't part of the drafting of the plan. It was before my time. I know some of the planning commissioners were seated at the time that the master plan. But that was one of the housing actions that was required, was the rental inspection. And I would have to believe that based on the data, that there's a fair percentage of the housing stock here that is rental. And that rental stock is particularly subject to decline, because we know, just based on other studies and literature, that rental property is not as well maintained as owner occupied property. So you have to be somewhat diligent in order to monitor that, to make sure that those properties at least meet minimal code. And there'll be some pushback and some impact on it. I imagine when this gets to city council, the landlord association, if there is one in the county, is going to come here in force to try to convince the council not to have a rental inspection program. And the reason being is that some of the landlords don't want to make the investment in keeping their properties up.
On the compliance officer, you mentioned public safety, and so are we talking like our police and fire department officers going into these, are these the compliance officers that we?
It'd be the compliance, be totally, at this point, it's Tony Belamonte.
Is there special training that's required to do these inspections?
No, not, I mean, usually the public safety is the ones that are concerned. When you do a rental inspection, some of the things that you pointed out are exactly what they're going to look at. Are the windows operable? Because sometimes the windows are painted over and they're not operable. So if there's a fire in the building, then there's less access to get out. They're going to look at things like faulty wiring, because some landlords, and I'm not want to paint a negative picture, but some people like to do their own work that may not be code compliant. So the checklist that they'll use is not going to be the entire code, but it's going to be focused on safety issues. Do they have fire alarms, for example? Is there a carbon monoxide monitor in the house? Is the area that has the HVAC, does it have adequate ventilation, or is things stacked around it? So a lot of it's common sense. Those are the type of inspections that they'll do.
I'm jumping around here a little bit, so forgive me here, right? The representative agent, if there's not a local property owner, was limited to Charlevoix and Emmett County, and it just seemed a little arbitrary that it was those two counties versus say Antrim or Sheboygan. I was just kind of.
I think the committee just said that they thought that the agent should at least live within the two county to be responsive.
It was initially just Emmett, and then we thought, well,
Let's do
Charlotte
Charlotte.
close too, so we want the agent to be able to get there in a reasonable amount of time. So I guess that could be Charlevoix or Sheboygan, Antrim too, but the thought was just short amount of time.
Would it be better to, instead of listing the counties, to just say has to be able to respond in 45 minutes?
Well, that's kind of.
I don't know, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyway, you know what, the city council is gonna hash this out, so I'm not We don't need to go to that kind of detail.
It seems like if this is passed, there's a tremendous amount of data that's collected in terms of perhaps maybe quality housing, non-quality housing. Will this information be available to the public to help them make decisions on housing?
Yes,
So this is something that would be part of on the website. They could see.
it could be on the website, but
violations.
the data should be collected and at least shared with the planning commission in order to take a look at other housing strategies.
My last question is, if I understand this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, this ordinance, if passed by city council as is, would be phased in 90 days.
It'd be phased in, they'll determine that, but it'll be phased in over a period of time. Yes.
Okay.
And then, like I had mentioned initially, there's no way that the public safety has the resources to do all of the inspections within a year. So the idea is that they would start at different locations in the community and then kind of on a rotating basis, make their rounds. So, I mean, when you're talking, you may have 800 inspections, you can't do all those.
By public safety, you mean our compliance officer?
Compliance officer, yeah.
Do it.
Rick?
Well, this was just in response to Doug's question about during the master plan discussion. One point that I remember talking about was the fact that there are few landlords in town that truly could be considered small landlords. And so I think, the idea of having this kind of a property maintenance code was partly came out of that fact that we felt that there needed to be some method to try to address those folks. And admittedly, I don't think there are a lot of them, but
And Rick, I don't want to put you on the spot, but just because it's not my background, but if any of the other commissioners wanted to shine in from more of a construction background, I guess I'm really concerned about some of this international standard and some of the requirements. It's difficult for a layman to read, to first of all have access to understand exactly what those requirements are. And again, my underlying concern is I want our housing to be safer for our residents. I want all the goals. My concern is am I encouraging this? Am I recommending the city to do something that's going to wipe out instantly some percentage, significant percentage, not just a few units, but if all of a sudden, based upon someone who owns a older home in Petoskey, I would question if my house would qualify under these standards. And so I would just hate to wipe out 10% or some arbitrary number, material percentage of the housing.
yeah, well, I think you make a good point. That hadn't really occurred to me before, and so I think is an important consideration. As I understand, the International Property Maintenance Code is pretty much of a low threshold. It's sort of like, well, these are sort of some bare minimum standards and to keep a property, in reasonably good condition, that they're not excessively strict or places an undue burden on a property owner, as I understand them.
I saw height restrictions on bedrooms, on roofs that were sloped, and I think about how many houses that I know of that has bedrooms upstairs with a sloped roof. I saw height restrictions on laundry rooms down in basements. I think about our Michigan basements. I mentioned electrical in the ground, how many houses have fully, relatively